Although it may not seem like it, this happened quite a while back, probably over 10 years ago now. I was in the later years of high school, and I was home alone on this particular day. My parents were away at a wedding that required them to stay at a hotel, and my brother worked the night shift. At that time, my family lived in a very well-known East Coast city in a blue-collar neighborhood. It was just starting to take a nosedive at the time. As a teenager, I was actually a little bit of a loner. I wasn't a nerd or anything like that though. I was a big dude who had some friends and went on dates occasionally, but I was also a natural introvert. This meant I really cherished the rare alone time that I got to have. This weekend, I was really looking forward to engaging in my normal empty house routine. You know, play some PlayStation on the big screen TV, order a late takeout dinner, either pizza or Chinese, and pig out while watching some Dragon Ball Z. At around 2 a.m., I fell asleep on the couch with my old dog Cecil. Cecil was a beagle as old as the hills themselves and had been in our family for about 8 years altogether. He was a very quiet and peaceful dog and spent his time begging for food and mostly sleeping. Unlike most beagles, Cecil never howled or barked. Instead, he was more than content to just rest his head on your lap and spend the entire night there. Anyway, back to the story. It's approximately 1 a.m. now. I had just finished the last slice of pizza and was dozing off on the couch when I hear a bang come from the back alleyway. Anyone who's ever lived in a big city knows that noises happen at all moments of the night. Cecil's head, though, immediately popped off of my lap, and the hair on his back stood straight up. He was always a bit skittish, so I calmed him down some and started to doze off again. No more than 2 minutes later, though, I hear another huge bang, and Cecil did something I'd never seen him do before. He took a soaring leap off the couch and ran like the wind towards the door leading to the basement, barking and growling like a dog twice his size. Honestly, the look on his face reminded me of the German Shepherd canine unit. I'd never seen him like that before, which immediately got my adrenaline pumping. Just barely, through my dog's persistent barking, I could now make out a banging noise that was constant. I remembered there was a seldom used door in the basement that led directly to our back alleyway. It was old and rusted and hard to open even with a key. It also made a lot of noise. In that moment, I realized someone was now trying to break into my house through the basement door. A quick little bit of context for anyone who's never lived in a bad neighborhood before. If someone tries to get into your home, they move on immediately after they realize your door is shut tight, if they want your stuff. If someone is persistently trying to get into your house, despite the door being shut tight though, they're there for you. Knowing this, I rushed upstairs to grab the heavy wood baseball bat that I kept under my bed exactly for situations like this. I headed down to my basement. I probably should have run, but I was a macho teenager with a tough guy complex. Plus, it's not a... While I'm heading down the stairs to my basement, Cecil blows past me with the speed and aggression of a dog half his age. Suddenly, I hear a man's voice call out, "Oh fuck, damn it!" The banging suddenly stopped. I didn't call the cops or anyone else after that, which was probably the dumbest thing I've ever done. Instead, I sat up for the rest of the night with a baseball bat in my hand. My brother came home that morning, and I told him everything that happened. We went to the basement door to take a look at its shape, but when we gave it a tug to open it, the entire door just fell right off. This psycho was only one good shove away from getting inside, but thank God old Cecil scared him off in time. I'm pretty sure that lazy fat old boy just saved my life. When I tell this story to people, they dismiss his actions as a dog doing what a dog is supposed to do. But when I tell you Cecil never barked or moved that fast in his life, you can take that all the way down to the bank. It was almost like he knew in that moment the urgency. Like he knew that door was about to give and I was going to be in danger. Unfortunately, a few years back we had to have him put down. He was just too old with no will to live anymore. Before the injection, I got one last moment alone with him. I thanked him one last time for his friendship and for what he did for me that night. At this point, I was a grown man with a wife and kids. I'm convinced that none of that would have happened if Cecil wasn't with me that night. Thanks, pal. I really miss you. Back in the 80s, my Aunt Kay was in her early 20s or so. This was before she married my uncle, and when she would drive long distances back and forth between her parents and my uncle's to visit. It was a transitional period for them. He had just graduated, and she hadn't moved out yet to be with him. It was a long drive across several states, through the desert as well. It took her many hours along the way. This desolate highway would have stretches of road that lasted hundreds of miles. Quite often, you wouldn't see a single other driver, let alone a gas station. So, Aunt Kay set out and began one of these journeys. A couple of hours into the drive, Aunt Kay noticed a dark vehicle slowly catching up behind her. She barely noticed at first as she continued to sing along to Les Miserables until the vehicle got aggressively close. She turned off the music and looked over into her rear-view mirror, seeing the vehicle flash its brights and a hand pointing at her car motioning to pull over. Alarmed, she quickly slowed down and began to look for a good place to pull off the road. Something must be wrong with her car if this guy is doing this. The second she began to pull off the road, though, she said she felt and heard clear as day, "Don't pull over," in her mind. And again, even stronger, "Don't pull over." Call it God, intuition, just a gut feeling, but a jolt of adrenaline and fear shot through her body as she slammed the gas and peeled out onto the highway. Heart pumping, Aunt Kay silently asked herself what the hell that was as she saw the vehicle peel out right behind her. The dark vehicle continued to follow closely, flashing their brights and motioning for her to pull over. Fear and confusion set in even further. Aunt Kay began to question just what was going on. Why was this driver motioning so hard for her to pull over? There must be something wrong with her car, right? But then what the hell was that warning she just felt from her instincts? It would have been a severe situation if her car broke down out there, especially before the time of cell phones. But instead, she pressed on. Just as her resolve started to waver, she began questioning if she truly did feel what she just felt. She started slowing back down when the dark vehicle began to pick up speed. It entered into the oncoming traffic lane and came level to my aunt's car. The driver smiled, motioned, and pointed. He mouthed the words "pull over" to my aunt through the window. She said in the moment she looked into his eyes, she could feel this guy was evil. She described this horribly sick feeling in the pit of her stomach and again heard the words come to her head, "Don't pull over." He was described as a greasy, scary-looking man who was missing a couple of teeth in his smile. She'll never forget that smile that sent chills through her that night. This quickly dispelled any thought she had of pulling over. Instead, she put the pedal to the metal to try and lose him. He chased after her. She slowed down, he slowed down. She would speed up. He'd speed up right on point. It got to the point where he began to try to push her car off the road. Now she was on the verge of tears as this creep continued to terrorize her all alone, stuck out here in the middle of nowhere. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of chasing, Aunt Kay saw a couple of semis off in the distance. She felt if only she could get close, or even in between those trucks, she would now be safe. She slammed on the gas. He continued to flash his lights, honk his horn, and try to smash into her car until she got close enough to those trucks. As she moved in between them, she saw the dark vehicle slow way down and eventually disappear completely from view. She stayed with those trucks for a couple of hours until she felt safe enough to pull over into a gas station at an exit and cry. Fast forward several years later, my aunt and uncle were now married. He's working at a law firm as a high-profile criminal prosecutor in Las Vegas. She was now a full-time mom of several young children. Now, since I've known my aunt, she's been obsessed with true crime. Dateline, 2020, Unsolved Mysteries, Forensic Files, these were always playing at their house non-stop, and this day was no different. She was there folding laundry in the kitchen while listening to the TV in the other room. The interviewer was talking about a man who was now being interviewed on death row. As she idly paired another match of socks, she heard the man describe one of his tactics for procuring victims. According to him, he would wait along the side of the highway. A car would go by with a family and he'd wait. Another car with a male driver would go by. He'd still wait. But every now and then, a car would go by with a pretty young woman driving all alone. So he'd pull out behind him and follow them, flash his brights, honk, and motion for him to pull over. Aunt Kay, paralyzed, continued to listen. You know, when they eventually would pull over, I'd tell them to pop the hood, and I'd be able to tell them what was wrong with their car. They would, and I'd yank a couple of random wires. When the car wouldn't start after that, I'd tell them, no problems, my buddy has a shop in the next town over. I can give you a ride, and he'll give you a real fair deal. My aunt slowly moved to the living room. They'd get in, and I'd rear and kill him, bury him anywhere out in the desert. It's not like they'd ever find all the bodies. I can't even count myself. When asked how many times he did this, he responded he had no idea. And how many got away? 2 or 3. My aunt stood alone, staring into the same toothless grin she'd seen on the highway that day. It was Henry Lee Lucas. Way back when, I had this summer job when I was a 15-year-old girl that was a few miles or so away from my house. I lived in a very rural, wooded area, and my parents never let me go into the woods by myself. They worked days though, and my job started at noon every day, so I had to walk to work. During this time, I chose to disobey them and walk through the woods instead of on the road. Walking this way to work would cut about a half-mile off my walk altogether, so every day at around the same time I'd walk through a very much abandoned state forest, down a deer path for about a mile or so. At the point it intersected a railroad track, I'd then walk a couple more miles down those tracks into town to my job. Stupid, I know, but I was 15 years old. Taking this path always freaked me out a lot, and I would always feel like I was being watched. It was shorter though, less sunny, and less hot as well, so I ignored my instincts, thinking my parents' influence must just be making me paranoid. My parents would pick me up every day after my shift, unaware of this daily routine. This continued on for weeks and weeks. One day though, I'm out walking about a mile away from any houses, very deep into the woods. I see there are now 2 porn magazine pages that have been ripped out and placed on the trail facing me. They hadn't been there the day before. I was completely creeped out, as these were clearly intentionally placed, probably for me, since I didn't know anyone else who utilized this area. I kept walking though. If I turned around at this point, I'd have further to go to get out of the woods. Then there was a huge hill to climb to get back to my house as well. No one would be around there to help me anyway. This particular section was a densely wooded area with brambles and dogwood, rolling hills as well, so I couldn't see particularly far in any direction. Suddenly, I could hear someone else walking close by. I stopped in my tracks. I would hear them for a split second, and then they would stop when I stopped as well. As I listened even more closely, I could hear what sounded like change in their pocket. I knew it was not an animal. Because of the echo of the surroundings though, I couldn't pinpoint exactly where this noise was coming from. Just to check that I was not crazy, I stopped once more. I heard the exact same noise in the silence of the forest, which quickly stopped when I stopped as well. Now I knew I was being followed. My heart was racing with fear. My vision went blurry. But my instincts told me not to speak out, not to run. Just keep walking down this dense deer path, further out into the woods. My gut also told me not to look behind me no matter what. I could sense there was someone right behind me now on the deer path, but I didn't dare to look back. I'm a rather short, chubby person and always have been. Looking at me, you'd probably assume I can't run very fast. So, if you wanted to catch me deep in the woods, you might assume you had a lot of time to do so. Looking back, I think that's exactly what this creep was thinking. But you see, back then, even though I was a little bit chubby, I ran cross-country and track and could run a 7-minute mile. Hills, particularly, were my specialty. I had always placed really well in the hilly terrain competitions. By no means was I the best runner or even a great runner, but I was certainly likely faster than whatever out-of-shape pedo creep was hanging out in the woods stalking a little girl. It's not that I was processing this thought at the time, I just instinctively knew it was not time to run, at least not yet. I kept on walking seemingly deeper into the woods because I knew the train track was just up ahead. There would be more space to run without tripping or getting caught in all these branches and brambles. It was terrifying, not looking back a single time, but something kept telling me not to. While I walked, I felt like my entire body was shutting down. It's a feeling I've never felt before or after that day. The feeling of being prey. Everything went blurry. I could feel the blood pulsing in my ears and my heart was pounding like crazy. I just kept walking like nothing was happening. I did not turn around, but I could now feel someone 5 feet behind me, following me for a good 1/8 of a mile. I didn't turn around still. I didn't scream because I knew no one would be there to hear me. As soon as I got near to the gravel tracks, which were elevated along a man-made gravel mound, I began to sprint. I ran on all fours up that hill, gripping on weeds to pull myself up faster. I sprinted along the tracks as fast as my lungs and legs would carry me. I could hear and see branches snapping below me in the woods, but now I was out in the sun. The woods were dark, so I couldn't see what was hidden behind those branches. Instead, I kept on sprinting. I never even saw who was chasing me, but I knew their intentions must be awful. After that, I never cut through those woods again. I didn't mention what happened to my parents until I was 18 and had moved out of the house. I was too afraid of being put in trouble or grounded. I'm what I would most certainly call a creep magnet. I get weirdos all the time. It's actually become sort of a joke I share with my friends and coworkers, telling them one of the many, oh so many, creepers I've encountered in my time as a retail employee. Naturally, you get all kinds of people coming into your store. I'm well known for my very bright attitude and overly chipper way of being, which has come to be loved by many regulars and newcomers alike. It's also, more than likely, a contributing factor as to why I get so many weirdos. I'd also imagine my height as well. I'm very short, standing at only 4'8", and looking about 5 years younger than my actual age of 21. I'm also rather filled out for how young I look, so I guess that's another reason as well. On to this story though. This day was like any other. Just another ordinary day working by myself in the store, checking out customers, stocking shelves in my moments away from the register. A very average day. At some point while on the register though, I greeted a man with a large dark beard, bald and wearing glasses as he came through the door. He immediately smiled and got this surprised look on his face. The one I've now come to know as the, oh shoot, I'm totally gonna creep on this girl today look. No biggie, I was used to it. I knew how to handle myself and brush it off. Eventually, after an hour or two of being on register, I'd pretty much cleaned out the store of my customers and moved out to stocking candy. The man before with the beard approached me with a smile and held up a large white trash can. Excuse me. Yeah? I replied, glancing up from the box I was currently stocking. Are there any more of these in the back? This one doesn't seem to have a lid, he said, gesturing to the large trash can in his hand. "Oh yeah, is that all? I can go and check that for you if you'd like." I smiled and was very polite like I always was with customers. I turned away and headed off to the stockroom to search for the item for him. I noticed that now he was following me, but I didn't think too much of it. I glanced down the aisles looking for any other customers as I walked down. Immediately though, I took note of the store's sheer emptiness. Well shit, I guess it's only us two in the store, I thought to myself. I moved through the stockroom door. I was quickly relieved when this guy stopped at the employees only entrance. "Just wait right there, I'll be right back," I said as I made a turn around some full rolltainers, which due to just receiving a truck, our stockroom was full of them. They stood very tall and were basically like giant movable walls. Very, very heavy, mind you. Being so small, I couldn't really move them much to make a path through and see what was on them. After only a minute or so, I'd managed to find myself a little path though, having 3 heavy ones on my right and left and one in front of me. I decided to give up on my search for the trash cans in this maze of things. Sighing, I went to turn around and sadly inform him of my defeat, only to find he was right there. He was now blocking my tiny path of walls, a very tight squeeze for a man of his stature. He was standing directly behind me. He leaned in to whisper to me, "You find him?" No, I don't think we have any." I tried to laugh and avoid acknowledging just how creepy this was, but I was very aware of my surroundings now. I was trapped in this small area, with walls at my back and sides towering over myself. This large man was standing in the way of my only exit, in a room very far from any other people. No cameras, no other employees in the store. I was helpless. I was increasingly growing scared at how this man was moving closer and not moving to let me out. I went to voice to him that I needed to return to work after a solid minute went by of him standing there blocking me, but I was not able to get out a single word. He said in a creepy, almost shy kind of voice, "You're just the cutest little thing. Do you know that?" Within an instant, I could feel the ill intention from this guy. Oh my god, this is how I die, I thought to myself. Surprising myself though, I choked out without thinking, "I think I just heard my bell." "What?" He looked confused and didn't budge a single inch. "I just heard my bell. There are people up front who need to be checked out and are looking for me right now." I stood there nervously, knowing full well neither of us had heard the familiar ching from the service bell I keep on the register. "But what about my items?" he asked, stepping right in front of me. He took a glance back toward the trash can. Again, with my lightning thinking, I blurted out, "I'll mark it down half price, no big deal." I laughed, trying to act like nothing was out of the ordinary. It seemed he was caught off guard by this. I slipped by him, seeing my opening at his turning around. I tried my hardest to walk away, pretending to be calm as I exited that room. I then sprinted to the front of the store the moment I was out of sight. Of course, after that, he left without even staying to purchase a single thing. So this happened around 9 years ago when I was 11 or so. Changed all the names, of course, but this is certainly fucked up. There was this girl at school named Amy who really didn't have very many friends. She was very quiet and honestly I thought she was a bit strange. I felt though like it would be nice to befriend her. So we started talking and she actually turned out to be really nice. We became best of friends rather quickly. It got to the point even where I'd spend every weekend at her house. We would even walk to school together in the morning. Even at my young age though, I could tell right away that there was something weird about her dad, Kevin. He was very interested in me, it seems. Always tried to play fight and stuff, which is weird in and of itself. Whenever he was around, I would just feel like something was wrong. He was a short, fat man with gray and white hair. He always had this weird smirk on his face and really wide eyes too. It started off with stealing bits of my food whenever I wasn't looking, then laughing and making sure to put his arms around my shoulders to apologize. He'd always show up wherever we were. Upstairs, downstairs, in the garden, he'd always be lurking around somewhere whenever I was over. I remember there was this day that Amy's non was visiting, Amy's mother's mom, and Kevin just kissed her non right on the mouth hello. It was so weird, but then it turned into the creepiest, sloppiest French kiss right in front of us. Everyone except me and Amy found it very funny. She put on this forced smile when her family looked over, but I was completely horrified. Maybe I shouldn't have gone back after that, but I felt like I had to, for Amy. After that, there was this day where we were playing in her room. Kevin came in and started up an argument over nothing. It got so heated he grabbed rubbish bags, saying he was going to throw away all of her belongings. Of course, an 11-year-old is going to go furious if they think their dolls and everything are going to be thrown away. She was hysterical. We followed him downstairs, where he turned around and told her in the most serious voice that if she ever spoke to him like that again, she would regret it. It was then that he started to remove his belt. What the fuck? She immediately pushed me toward their front door, which was just in front of the stairs. She was sort of half laughing, forcing a smile, as she tried to convince me this was no big deal, but I could tell it would be as soon as I left. I got out the door, but when I turned around and waited, Kevin slammed it shut hard. All I could hear after that was Amy screaming at the top of her lungs. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to just leave her, so I stood there. Eventually, I found the courage to sneak my way back in. I went upstairs to Amy, who was now brushing her doll's hair. She smiled at me, but she had this tear-stained face that was so miserable. There were no visible marks at all. It seemed he could have hit her anywhere. I then felt as if I had to protect Amy from now on, so I continued going there and didn't tell my mom a thing. One night I woke up thirsty, and we were close enough for me to just go get a drink myself. When I went downstairs, Kevin was laying there, on the floor in the dark. He was wearing nothing but tidy whities, and he stared up at me, still awake. It was the creepiest thing I had ever seen. Only the street lamp from outside shining through a gap in the blind lit up the room just enough to see him there. Needless to say, I did not get myself a drink. Instead, I ran back upstairs and shut the door. I wouldn't go there after that until I knew for sure he would not be there, and I didn't sleep over anymore after. I'm not sure, but I think if I ever told my mom, she'd go and kill him right away. I was talking to Amy recently, actually. She opened up to me because she sent me her mental health assessment sheet. She told me when she was 10 she had woken up to Kevin raping her 15-year-old sister. Kevin was not her sister's dad, not that it makes it any better at all. She was screaming for Amy for help. It also stated he would regularly beat Amy as well. The most recent incident was 2 years ago. He beat her right in front of a friend, and her friend called the police. I told her all of the things I'd seen back in the day and how I knew something wasn't right. All I know of him now is that he's in the hospital, suffering with COPD, and I really don't give a fuck. Also, her mom knew this was happening but didn't do a single thing about it either. More than a few years ago, I was working as a burlesque entertainer in a gentleman's club and was idly sitting at the end of the bar one night when this couple came in. Not exactly unusual. I had no contact with them and thought nothing of their being there until later. A few days after that night, the doorman handed me a piece of paper that had 2 names and phone numbers written down on it, Laura and Richard. I was supposed to call one of them or something, so I called up Laura, who told me they had been the couple who had been at the bar the other night. They said they'd noticed me and thought I would be perfect for a part in a movie Richard was now producing. Would I be up for a meeting, perhaps? Of course I would. Who wouldn't? I was told Richard would pick me up the next night at 7 and to wear something wild. 7 o'clock came by the next evening. I was ready in a white lace dress with an ostrich feather trim when Richard showed up outside my building. I went down, introduced myself, and got into the car. We agreed to go to a local bar I knew very well for the meeting. First, though, we had to go back to his place, so he could pick up some contracts he'd forgotten. Off we went. He disappeared inside the house and came back out holding a few manila envelopes and an open bottle of beer, a brand I didn't drink, mind you. Plus, it was against the law to drink alcohol in a vehicle here. I stuck the beer into the window well of his Jeep, and we went off to the bar. When we arrived, he showed me what were supposedly scripts from this movie he was producing. Some contracts. Honestly, it looked pretty legit. Richard was also very nice and polite as well, and I was interested in doing this role. I'd made some plans to go out later with my soon-to-be boyfriend, so I excused myself to go call him on the bar's payphone. I took the Corona I'd ordered at the bar with me to the bank of phones. As a dancer, I'd been taught by the other older girls to never ever let your drink out of your sight. My boyfriend wanted to get going to another club, so I went back to the table where Richard was at. I told him I had to go. Well, he didn't like that, did he? He tried a few different things to get me to go to the movie set with him immediately, saying I could meet Mickey Rourke, check out the set, but all I really wanted to do was spend some time with my boyfriend. I declined, took Richard's card, and left. I never heard from Richard again after that, but a couple of months later, I did hear from the police when they came around to the bar I was working at. They pulled out these 2 gigantic books of mugshots with a stack of Polaroids as well. They said they wanted to talk to all of us about this predator couple who had been setting up meetings with dancers by saying they were in the film industry, then drugging them, raping them, and attacking them. They showed me these 2 mugshot books and asked if anyone I recognized was in the pictures. Well, immediately I identified Richard and Laura. They showed me the Polaroids, which were all trophy pictures of the couple in the act of attacking these poor drugged-up girls. They asked if anyone knew any of the victims and where they might find them in order to talk to them. I only knew a couple of the women in the photographs, but there were a lot this had happened to. Richard and Laura were thoroughly prosecuted. He went to jail, but she did not. This is because she was from a wealthy family and also turned witness on him. About 12 years after Richard was convicted, I saw in the newspaper he was up for the possibility of parole. I wrote down a letter to the parole board telling this story and urging them not to ever let him back out. He was obviously a dangerous offender who should stay in prison for the entirety of his sentence. If I hadn't thought about it and drunk that open beer he had just offhanded to me in his Jeep on the way to that meeting, I would never have made it to the meeting, and I probably would have ended up in that stack of Polaroids. Girls and guys, always keep an eye on your drinks. Have fun, but make sure to be careful when you're out and about, okay? When I was 7 and my sister was 8, we were allowed to go down the street to the park by ourselves, which was right down the street from my house and right next to a church as well. Because of this, we very frequently went, but we had to keep our eyes peeled for things specifically like broken beer bottles, used needles, that kind of dirt. Also, don't poke at the drunks in the bushes. We were also told to run if a black Lincoln Town car came near asking us for help. Adults don't ask kids for help unless they want to grab them, you hear? I was pretty plucky for a poor kid. I didn't exactly live in a nice part of town. This particular day, we were crawling around in the bushes looking for drunk change. The nickels and dimes that would sometimes roll out of a really drunk person's pockets. They would add up if you could look around carefully. We wanted to go buy some cheap candy at the convenience store when all of a sudden, we heard a man's voice, coughing, crying, and what sounded like pleading for help. He was curled up beside the church. He couldn't have been too far into adulthood, but he was so slashed up, his face had almost no discernible features except for the tears streaking through this mess of dried blood. He was covered all over in blood as well. He was shaking hard, begging the wall of the church to help him. Blue plaid flannel and really gunky black jeans, all over just black-brown runnels of dried blood, and small cuts all over as well. A particularly bad one going almost all the way through his leg. I'm guessing he had lost a lot of blood. He was absolutely wrecked. We went over, and my older sister told me to stay there with him. She was going to try and get some help. Somehow, we managed to help get him to the front of the church, but it was midweek in the summer, so nobody was there. I sat there with this trembling, weeping young man, keeping my hands to myself. He was still oozing blood from cuts everywhere. I had to keep repeatedly telling him help was on the way. Well, my sister went home and forgot about me. The old woman in the divided house on the corner called the police because she recognized me, but not the hunched up mess I had helped get to the front door of the church. Eventually, the cops came by and told me to go home. The man was put into the back of a car. I don't know what happened to him in the end, but it didn't look good. I do know it was a local gang that did that to him. I figured this out from his garbles as he was constantly apologizing to invisible attackers. He was probably very deep into shock. We went to the park the next day, and the hedges we had been crawling through just the day before had all been chopped down. Most of the lower limbs of the pine trees also got lopped off as well, so drunks and gang members couldn't hide in them at night anymore. That's the most sad, disturbing story I have in my childhood. I'd never seen an adult male cry or be so broken before or since. Gang violence really is terrifying. We never talked about this incident again, but it took an entire week for them to get around to spraying the sheer amount of dried blood off of the building. It was extremely bad. I've shared this before elsewhere, but I figured I'd share it here as well. In high school, I used to hang out with my friend named John almost every day. When we first began hanging out at this house, I would sometimes hear disembodied footsteps every now and then. Very often, though, I would see what looked like a shadow of a person out of the corner of my eye, only to have it disappear moments later. After a month or so of this, I finally mentioned this to my friend. He got mad almost immediately and demanded to know who had told me he had seen these shadow people. He begged me to not joke around with him about something so serious. I assured him that it was no joke. Soon, we began to hear laughter when we knew no one else was home. Doors would shut by themselves, and the TV would turn itself on and off. One day, after these experiences had grown more and more intense and more frequent over time, I mentioned to my friend trying to bless the house. The instant this left my mouth, a box sitting on a nearby counter flew off the counter and almost smacked me in the head. It sounds completely unbelievable, but it was the single most terrifying experience of my life. My friend and I quickly grabbed up some holy water and sprinkled it around the house while saying a prayer. We never experienced anything in the house again. Months later, my friend came to stay at my lake house with me for a weekend. At one point in the night, we both thought we saw a shadow person, but we decided to pass it off as nothing. Later that night, though, we woke up to what sounded like voices emanating from the living room. He went to go investigate, thinking someone may have broken in, while I stayed put. A few moments later, I heard the sound of someone thundering down the hallway. I ran out to see why my friend was running, but he was not in the house. Instead, my friend was outside on the porch. He came inside, saying he'd heard that loud noise from the house too, and he thought it had been me. Nothing else happened for the rest of the weekend, but the next time I went to that house, after it had sat empty for about a week, a picture frame with my photo in it had been ripped off the wall and thrown down the hall. I also noticed all of the pillows from my couch were stacked on top of one another and in the very middle of the couch as well. I stopped hanging out with John after this, and I never really experienced anything of that sort again. I don't know if he was cursed or haunted or what, but it was so weird.